Hello everyone, my name is Blue, and with this video I'm going to talk about Molten Core. You have done all the work, grinded all the high level dungeons such as Stratholme and Golemagg. Perhaps you bought even some PvP equipment to strengthen your bots, and you are ready to send your army inside the tunnels of Molten Core and challenge the fierce bosses that awaits behind the portal. And this guide might not be perfect, as it is based on my own experience and feedback, but I do hope it will give you some understanding how the fight works. Here we go! The boss, Lucifron. Lucifron has 5 abilities: Impending Doom, Shadow Shock, Flame Strike, Lucifron's Curse, and Shadow Nova. Lucifron is accompanied by 2 Flamewaker Priests and 2 Protectors. The Priests have 3 abilities: Immolate, Shadow Word Pain, and Dark Mending. I have found no data about the Protectors. Let us look at the fight. Before we engage, set your cross mark on Lucifron for your off tank and a skull mark on one of the Flamewaker Priests. The kill order I suggest you follow is first the Priests, then the Protectors, and last Lucifron himself. The classes that are VIPs in your raid for this fight are those who can dispel magical effects, such as Priests and Paladins. This is because Lucifron casts a very dangerous ability called Impending Doom, and this needs to be dispelled immediately or it might wipe your raid. It is also beneficial to have these classes to dispel the Priest's Immolate and Shadow Word Pain. Lucifron is a little bit special when it comes to his abilities. He will start Shadow Shock at 75%, and this is unavoidable. At 50% he will start casting Flame Strike, but your bots are insanely good at interrupting, so no danger here. And at 25% he will start casting his Curse. You can use a druid or a mage to remove this from your raid. When the fight reaches 3 minutes, he will cast his Shadow Nova, but just as before, bots will with ease interrupt this ability. The Flamewaker Priests are able to heal with their ability Dark Mending, but honestly, in this fight, this ability is neglectable. Even though there are a lot of abilities, the fight is actually really simple. You have one job as a player, and that is to move the skull to the next target. Everything else will be done by your bots. And this is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Lucifron. The boss, Magmadar. Magmadar has 6 abilities: Lava Bomb, Lava Breath, Panic, Summon Gorehound, Frenzy, and Berserk. Magmadar summons Gorehounds. The Gorehounds have one noticeable ability, and it is Serrated Bite. Let us look at the fight. Before we start, make sure you set your skull mark your focus, and then we can engage. You can send in your tank by the send to command and the ability flare. Send your tank to the corner of a wall to avoid his lava breath, and position yourself away from the raid so that the lava bombs are not hitting your bots. When the boss fears, Priest and Paladin can dispel this because it's a magical effect. Throughout the fight, Magmadar will buff himself often with Frenzy. Only hunters with the ability Tranquilizing Shot, a skill drop from Lucifron, can dispel this from the boss. Magmadar will summon 2 Core Hounds to his aid. Even though it is a cost ability, this is not interruptible. The hounds themselves have one very dangerous ability called Serrated Bite and is unavoidable. It is very important to kill them as soon as possible within the same time window, or they will endlessly resurrect. The boss needs to be killed before reaching 5 minutes into the fight because he has a reserve mechanic. We are now close to 5 minutes in the fight, so it is better now to focus everything you have on the boss. Otherwise he will go berserk and it will wipe your raid. So do feel free to ignore the Core Hounds at this point. And that is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Magmadar. The boss Gehennas. Gehennas has 3 abilities: Rain of Fire, Gehennas Curse, and Shadow Bolt. Gehennas is accompanied by 4 Flame Wakers and 1 Flame Waker Priest. The Flame Waker has 2 abilities: Fist of Ragnaros and Thunder Armor. The Flame Waker Priest has 3 abilities: Immolate, Shadow Word Pain, and Dark Mending. Let us look at the fight. Before we engage, do mark Gehennas with a cross mark for your off tank and a skull on the Flame Waker Priest. It is important that your tank or tanks keep all the aggro on themselves. I suggest to use the send to command on both of your tanks and let them build up their threat, while the rest of your raid waits a little bit longer. Once the ads are focused on your tanks, use the follow command to unfreeze them from the previous send to command. Since the Flame Wakers have a very powerful AoE stun, make sure your tank is facing these ads away from the raid. Besides the stun, Flame Wakers will reduce your raid's armor. It will add some extra pressure on your healers, but it remains doable. The Priest has the same abilities from the Lucifron fight: Dark Mending as their healing ability, and their Immolate and Shadow Word Pain can be dispelled easily with a Priest or a Paladin. Gehennas will throughout the fight cast Rain of Fire. Bots will avoid this, but you, as a player, will need to pay attention. Gehenna's Curse is a dangerous ability that must be removed immediately. Make sure you have enough druids and mages to do so. And every 15 seconds, Gehennas will cast his Shadow Bolt to add extra pressure on your raid. It is normal that you struggle for a while with the boss. but here are the 3 most important things to this fight. Number 1, remove his curse. Number 2, Fist of Ragnaros must land only on your tanks. And number 3, avoid his rain of fire. And that is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Gehennas. The boss Garr. Garr has 2 abilities, Magma Shackles and Anti-Magic Pulse. Garr is accompanied by Magmakin and 7 Firethorn. Magmakin has the follow abilities, Flame Buffet, Magma Blast, Fire Nova, and Flame Shock. The Firethorn have 2 abilities, Immolate and Eruption. Let us look at the fight. Before we engage, do make sure you set your focus on Magmakin and mark him with the moon. It is very important that your tanks contain all the aggro of the ads. For this reason, I suggest not using any other markings and let the bots decide for themselves. You can still use the skull mark to burst a Firethorn down if needed. Once your raid is engaged, use a macro for your Warlock and banish Magmakin. Magmakin is incredibly dangerous because of his abilities. Flame Buffet increases our raid's damage taken to fire. This ability stacks, and combined with the eruption from the Firethorn, it will become a AoE one-shot ability. Magma Blast is a cast that needs to be interrupted from Magmakin. If your raid fails, the targeted raid member will receive 6000 fire damage and likely die immediately. Fire Nova is an AoE that adds extra pressure on your healers. And the last ability from Magmakin is Flame Shock. This ability is neglectable and easily removed by your priest and paladins. Garr himself is a lot easier to deal with. Magma Shackles will cause you trouble if your raid is too spread out because of the eruption explosions. Feel free to use your NPCbot recall teleport command to bring your raid back together. And his other ability is Anti-Magic Pulse. This ability can remove beneficial spell effects on your raid, such as healing over time and buffs. The last ability of this whole boss fight is Immolate, which is an instant cast from the Firethorn. This ability is easily dispelled by a priest and paladins. Once all the Firethorn are dead, you can place a skull mark on Magmakin and focus him down. Garr will become an easy tank and spank encounter and just bring his health to 0. It is normal that you struggle with this fight and that you have to skip him for the time being until your raid is more properly geared. But the most important thing of this whole encounter is to CC Magmakin. The most efficient way is the use of Banish, but any other forms of CC works as well, such as stuns and fears. And that is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Garr. The boss, Baron Geddon. Baron Geddon has 4 abilities: Ignite Mana, Inferno, Living Bomb, and Summon Firewalker. Baron Geddon will summon throughout the fight Firewalkers. They have the abilities Inside Flames and Fire Blossom. Let us look at the fight. Before we engage, send your range to one spot with the NPCbot send to command and send your off-tank further away from the raid. This boss fight is the perfect example of how to use your off-tank efficiently, while the rest of the raid can deal with the adds. When your raid is in position, you'll have to lure out Baron Geddon by running ahead. Once you see him coming towards you, run back as quickly as possible. Mark Baron Geddon with a cross mark, so your off-tank will know what to do. When there is no skull mark on a target, your bots will always prioritize the cross mark. Baron Geddon will only target players with his ability Living Bomb. Once you have this debuff, you have 8 seconds to run away from your raid. If you are a class that can enjoy the benefits of being ranged, just keep your distance and you will be fine. Once the bomb explodes, it will spawn a Fire Walker. As soon as this ad enters the fight, mark it with its go and burst it down. These ads are too dangerous to ignore as they have the follow abilities. Inside Flames, which reduces your fire resistance. This ability is easily dispelled by a priest and paladins. And Fire Blossom, which will periodically inflict AoE damage to your raids. Baron Geddon will burn your raid's mana with the ability Ignite Mana. This debuff must be dispelled by your priests and paladins as soon as possible. Baron Geddon's last ability is Inferno. Everyone in close range of the boss will receive a lot of fire damage. This is the main reason why the boss needs to be tanked by your off-tank, so that your ranged will be safe from this ability. In general, you as a player needs to stay away from your raid because of the Living Bomb. And you have to make sure the Firewalkers are killed as soon as possible. After every Firewalker kill, your bots will automatically attack the marked boss with the cross, chipping away at his health until he reaches 0. And this is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Baron Geddon. The boss Shazzrah. Shazzrah has 5 abilities: Shazzrah's Curse, Arcane Explosion, Deaden Magic, Counter Spell, and Blink. Shazzrah is accompanied by Hassrash. Hassrash has 5 abilities: Crystal Flash, Chain Burn, Evocation, Arcane Barrage, and Arcane Blast. Let us look at the fight. Before you engage the boss, make sure you set your skull mark on Shazzrah and the cross mark on Hassrash. I would suggest you place your ranged away from the boss with the NPCbot sent to command. Once your ranged is in place, send both of your tanks at a decent distance towards the bosses. The moment your tanks have picked up the aggro, you as a player must stand near your tank. The reason is Shazzrah's ability to blink. He will use his ability only on you, and when he does, he will lose all his aggro. By being close to your tank, he can immediately pick up the aggro again without moving from his spot. Shazzrah releases roughly every 4 seconds an arcane explosion to all nearby enemies. This is the reason why your ranged needs to stay at a distance. If after a blink Shazzrah loses aggro and runs towards your ranged, simply use a macro to order your tank to cast taunt on your target. Shazzrah's Curse is a very dangerous ability. This curse will double the magic damage taken for your raid, and since both bosses are casters, this might be very alarming. Make sure you have enough druids or mages to remove it. Roughly every 10 seconds, Shazzrah will buff himself with Geddon magic. This buff reduces all magical damage he receives by 50%. This buff is quickly dispelled by a priest or shaman. The last ability of Shazzrah is Counterspell. If the casting of your own spell is interrupted by this ability, you will be unable to cast any spells of that school of magic for 10 seconds. Shazzrah will cast this every 15 seconds. Fast Rush is easier to deal with, but it can be a nuisance. His crystal flash stuns enemies in a cone in front of him, but you can easily avoid this by moving your off-tank so that Shazzrah will face away from the raid. Arcane Blast is basically Shazzrah's main ability. Each time Shazzrah casts Arcane Blast, he will buff all the damage done by his other arcane spells by 15%. But the drawback of this powerful ability is that it rapidly drains his mana to 0. Chain Burn burns away your raid's mana and deals some damage. Arcane Barrage inflicts arcane damage to a target, but this ability is also neglectable. Shazzrah's last ability is Evocation. Since his mana will be depleted very fast, you will notice that he will start channeling this ability. It will replenish his mana, but while channeling, Shazzrah will take increased damage. Once Shazzrah is dead, the fight instantly becomes easier, and just bring Shazzrah's health to 0. All in all, this boss fight is actually pretty easy when your raid is decently geared. Your only job as a player is to stand near the boss if you are following this tactic with the send to command. And this is basically how the fight goes. Now you know how to kill Shazzrah. The boss Sulfuron. Sulfuron has 4 abilities: Hand of Ragnaros, Inspire, Summon Flame Imp, and Demoralizing Shout. Sulfuron is accompanied by 4 Flame Waker priests. They have 3 abilities: Immolate, Shadow Word Pain, and Dark Mending. Let us look at the fight. Before we engage, mark Sulfuron with a cross mark for your off-tank and a skull mark on one of the Flame Waker priests. Now select your off-tank and send him with the NPCbot send to command towards Sulfuron. Once your off-tank is holding aggro on Sulfuron, use again the NPCbot send to command to send your off-tank next to a wall. If by chance some of the priests are following your off-tank, that is all fine, as long as your main tank is fighting the priest with the skull mark away from the boss. The reason why we are separating the raid is because of the ability Hand of Ragnaros. Hand of Ragnaros is an annoying ability that stuns and knocks your raid back. Sulfuron also has the ability Inspire. which is a powerful buff he gives to one of his allies. Summon Flame Ink is something Sulfuron does throughout the whole fight. The imps themselves are pretty harmless and basically die by your raid's AoE. But once they enter the fight, they will AoE blast fire damage. The last ability of Sulfuron is Demoralizing Shout, which greatly reduces the melee and ranged attack power of nearby enemies. The range of this ability goes pretty far and is difficult to avoid, unless your range engages the boss more than 40 yards away. The Flame Waker Priests are almost exactly the same as the previous versions we have encountered so far, having the abilities Immolate and Shadow Word Pain. Both of these abilities can be dispelled by a priest and a paladin. The last ability is this time a little bit different. Their Dark Mending to heal an ally is now a cast ability that can and must be interrupted by your raid. Once you have killed all the Flame Waker Priests, simply bring Sulfuron's health to 0. The fight is pretty simple, and with a decently geared raid, you can ignore these tactics and just AoE everyone down. Your only job as a player is to mark the priests with a skull, and if you can, do help interrupt the Dark Mending heal. And this is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Sulfuron. The boss, Golemagg. Golemagg has 3 abilities: Magma Splash, Pyroblast, and Earthquake. Golemagg is accompanied by 2 core ragers. They have 2 abilities: Mangle and Golemagg's Trust. Let us look at the fight. Before we engage, do set your skull mark on Golemagg and your cross mark on one of the core ragers. This fight is very punishing for your melee classes. I suggest to use the NPCbot send to command to send your ranged out of harm's way. The tactic I am showing you in this video is to only utilize your ranged and keep your melee DPS as well out of the fight. When your raid is all set, do select both of your tanks and send them with the command towards the bosses. Depending on how well geared your off-tank is, you might want to taunt the other core rager as well and send your off-tank away from Golemagg. The way we have now positioned our raid reduces the total damage taken and allows your healers to focus mainly on the tanks. Now let us look at all the abilities. Golemagg has the following abilities: Earthquake, an ability that does a lot of AoE damage to nearby enemies, and after every cast, it returns faster. This is a soft and rage mechanic that will catch up to you and will wipe your raid if your DPS is too slow. The other ability that punishes your melee is Magma Splash. It applies a damage over time and a debuff that endlessly stacks unless your melee stops attacking Golemagg. This ability is incredibly deadly for your main tank. I suggest before you engage, you go to his role settings in the gossip menu and deactivate his ability to DPS. Your main tank will not attack anymore, but he will still cast his taunt on Golemagg. The last ability of Golemagg is Pyroblast, a damage over time that lasts for 12 seconds on random targets. but this is very doable. The Core Rangers have two abilities. Mangle, which applies a powerful damage over time on the target, and their last ability is Golemagg's Trust. This buff greatly empowers them and cannot be removed. This boss is a very difficult challenge if your raid is under-geared. The trick to this fight is honestly really simple. You just need insane DPS, preferably arranged, and some well-geared tanks with healing to match. If 2 tanks doesn't work, you can add more as long as you are dealing some damage. It is alright to skip this boss if it seems like an impossible task. And this is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Golemagg. The boss, Majordomo. Majordomo has 4 abilities. Aegis of Ragnaros, Damage Shield, Magic Reflection, and Teleport. Majordomo is accompanied by 4 Flamewaker healers and 4 Flamewaker elites. The healers have one noticeable ability, Shadow Bolt. I have found no data for the elites. Let us look at the fight. This boss looks very intimidating because of his small army. The trick is to keep all the ads on your tanks and when possible try to sheep one of the healers. You'll notice that I am not using a skull mark to initiate the fight. Instead, I am just sending my tanks with the NPCbot send to command. If you use this command, do make sure you also use the follow command to enroute your tanks afterwards. The reason is that when you use the skull mark, your tanks will experience more difficulties to keep large groups of ads on themselves. So, to engage, send in your tanks, and before you do anything too crazy, make sure the tanks are holding all the aggro. I already marked one of the healers with a moon mark, which means that the bots will ignore this target and sometimes they will even cast some CC on them. When you notice an opportunity, use a macro to command your mage to cast sheep on one of the healers. It can be the healer you have marked with a moon, or any other healer that is basically outside your raid's AoE. I suggest that you kill first all the healers, and then the elites. Majordomo himself cannot be killed. Now that we have engaged and are fighting, let us talk about abilities. Majordomo has 4 abilities. Aegis of Ragnaros is an ability that gives everyone an absorb shield. If melee attacks these shields, they receive shadow damage, but since it is an absorb, you can break it. Damage shield is a buff Majordomo also casts on himself and his allies, a buff you cannot remove, and just as Aegis, it will damage melee attackers on hit. Magic Reflection is also a buff that he gives to everyone and cannot be removed. But this time, it will punish your casters. Majordomo's last ability is Teleport. He will use Teleport on someone of your raids into the Burning Coals. He will teleport someone of your raids into the Burning Coals. If this is you, run out as quickly as possible. If it is one of your DPS or tank, you might want to help in getting out if they decide not to move. You can do this by the send to command or use the recall teleport command to summon everyone to you. Do note that the Burning Coals will add a movement speed reduction on everyone who stands in it. The Flamewaker healers will honestly spam just one ability, Shadow Bolt. luckily this is interruptible. So what do you need to do? You as a player need to make sure that the tanks have all the aggro. Tanks with good AoE skills such as a paladin or a death knight might excel in this, and try to only use the skull mark to burst an ad down. Kill first all the healers and don't forget to sheep one when you have the chance. And lastly, don't stand in the coals. This is basically how the fight works. And now you know how to defeat Majordomo. The boss, Smolder. Smolder has 8 abilities: Charred Earth, Pyroblast, Billowing Roar, Summon a Lava Spawn, Smolder Bomb, Flame Buffet, Scorch, and Flame Tsunami. The Lava Spawn have one noticeable ability: Fireball. Let us look at the fight. This boss is basically the strongest boss of whole Molten Core. The fight itself is a huge DPS race, and you as a player need to dance along the mechanics. Before we engage, do make sure your raid is on one of the safe locations. You can spot these locations easily because they have on the left side an extra stone wall that sticks out from the path. And it is this wall that protects you from the very deadly Flame Tsunami. Once you are in position, you can mark Smolder with a skull mark. Smolder himself has 7 abilities. Charred Earth is a deadly AoE that he places on the ground and stays for 3 minutes. Bots will evade this. Try to be careful not to stand in it, and make sure your safe zone is not covered too quickly in this. I suggest you start fighting Smolder at the beginning of your safe zone and slowly move Smolder more up north. Once your safe zone is becoming too dangerous, you will have to move to the next one. Do watch out. Only run towards the other safe zone right after the Flame Tsunami. The Flame Tsunami is always at the same time when Smolder casts Bellowing Roar and fears your raid for a couple of seconds. Try to stand closer to the wall so you won't be feared into the lava. After this fear, you can start running towards the next safe zone. Once you start running, I suggest you place the skull mark on yourself. This way the bots will not attack Smolder anymore and will follow you. If you wish to be sure, you can as well use the command to teleport your bots or use the follow command. The other abilities Smolder has are the following. Summon Lava Spawn is a dangerous ability. These lava spawns will spam fireballs at you, and if you do not kill them after 20 seconds, they will regenerate themselves to full health and duplicate. Once they spawn, it is your top priority to burst them down as quickly as possible. Use the skull mark to focus them. Pyroblast is randomly cast on your raid. This is unavoidable. Smolder Bomb is an ability that hits nearby allies as well. Scorch is an ability that is only cast on your main tank. And Smolder, his last ability is Flame Buffet. This ability is very dangerous as well, and you will start casting this at 15%. Not only does it inflict fire damage, it also increases the fire damage taken off your raids. My advice for this boss is to practice the mechanics. Grind Molten Core for better gear, and try to find the right balance between enough healers and DPS in your raids. DPS is of great importance. The lava spawns of course need to die, but if you have not enough DPS and you still manage to survive all the mechanics, you will sadly run out of safe zones in the end. This is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Smolder. The boss, Ragnaros. Ragnaros has 7 abilities. Elemental Fire, Wrath of Ragnaros, Lava Burst, Summon Son of Flame, Submerge, Magma Blast, and Ragnaros' last ability is Hand of Ragnaros. Let us look at the fight. Honestly, if you are able to beat Smolder, you will normally have no issues with this boss. To start this event, you will first have to defeat the boss Majordomo, and he will teleport here at the center. Just simply walk up to him and engage in a conversation. Once you are done, you are ready, and Ragnaros will be summoned. Before you engage, make sure you as a player are positioned a little bit northeast from the boss. I will explain this later. If you are now in position, make sure your tank is the closest to Ragnaros. This is because he will cast Elemental Fire, and this is a very dangerous ability. Probably because Ragnaros will target the closest enemy in melee range. And this ability will literally melt anyone from your raids. Wrath of Ragnaros is the reason why we have to position ourselves northeast from the boss. This ability has a seriously big knockback, and you do not wish to fly in a remote lava river, which forces you to swim a long distance back to the fight. It might happen that your bots will get spread out by this, which makes it difficult for your healers to keep everyone alive. So do feel free to use the NPCbot teleport command to summon them back to you. Another annoying knockback ability from Ragnaros is Lava Burst. This ability works different. Ragnaros will only target enemies with mana. If you are a player with mana, I suggest you to stay away from the bots, because this ability will also AoE damage on impact, which you wish to avoid as much as possible. After fighting Ragnaros for 3 minutes, he will submerge and will not be attackable. In this phase, he will summon his Sons of Flame. Simply take care of these ads and wait for Ragnaros to emerge again. Ragnaros will summon Sons of Flames throughout the whole fight. They are not that threatening, but I do suggest you to take them out when they spawn. If Ragnaros has no one near him, he will cast the one-shot ability Magma Blast, but you do not need to worry. There is always a bot nearby. Ragnaros' last ability is Hand of Ragnaros. This ability stuns enemies for 2 seconds in a small cone in front of him. To my experience, this rarely happens and is neglectable. This boss might get chaotic really quickly, but you as a player only need to watch out for a couple of things. Position yourself a little bit northeast, and if you have mana, don't stand near the bots, and kill the Sons of Flames when they are summoned. And this is basically how the fight works. Now you know how to kill Ragnaros. everyone! We've reached the end of the video. For those who are watching and are new to raiding, I hope this guide is a stepping stone into your new adventure to raiding. And for those who are already a veteran, maybe this video gave some new insights. Of course, this guide might not be perfect, but my goal was to create a more clear picture of how to defeat these bosses and what they are capable of. Before I end the video, I want to take this opportunity to give my thanks to Dinkledork and his amazing team to offer this repack completely free and hosting as well a free public realm for those who wish to experience this repack in a friendly social environment. Thank you for watching everyone, and I hope to see you soon on the server. Bye bye!